Good spring break? Lots of sleep? Not a lot of sleep?
No.
Uh-oh. Toby. Blazer. Ben. Julia, Sergio, Daniel, Grant. Okay, we've got to pick up on chapter 9, and chapter 9 is looking at manipulation skills. Okay. So we talked about prehension and reaching before spring break. So I'm hoping that you had a chance to take a quick look at that. Rapid aiming movements, so might be difficult to think of a motor skill that involves rapid aiming movements straight away. But if you think about a cockpit in a plane, or more recently, the way that they're creating dashboards and controls in cars, where instead of using a pedal or using a key, you have to reach and press a button. So when we look at rapid aiming movements, that they involve initiation and acceleration and then deceleration to hit your target. All right? So when we look at the research on this, we see that younger adults have a pretty symmetrical acceleration, deceleration phase. All right? So when they start moving, the curve is pretty equal to the target. All right? When you watch older adults do these kinds of skills, then they accelerate, but they don't move such a long distance. All right? So we've got distance 1 and distance 2 are pretty similar for young adults, but when we look at older adults, when we look at older adults, the curve is skewed a little bit, and we see this kind of scenario. So now D1 is shorter, I don't move so far, and it takes me much longer to slow the limb down and be accurate to hit the target. Right? As I say, it's difficult to come up with a good sports skill perhaps, but driving or flying a plane or those kinds of activities, be careful when you're looking at the literature here, because a lot of this data is laboratory based and not out in the field. So they do literally tasks where they make someone push a button or hit a pad, and then they film them and they look at the trajectory of the limb. Okay? So we want to be a little bit careful with the literature, but just the idea that if we were asking someone who was older to fly the plane, drive an electric car, that we might see some impact on performance because of this longer deceleration phase. That means that for older adults, practice of these skills is very, very important, because the more knowledgeable they are about the skill, the more practice they have at the skill, it kind of balances the slowing down aspect. So what about sport skills that are manipulative skills? The most common in the research is catching. There's a lot of literature out there, not as much as there is about throwing, but there's a lot of literature on catching. But manipulative skills often involve reception, right? So a reception skill, I'm receiving something. So it could be a soccer skill, right? It doesn't have to be receiving, manipulating with my hands. I could be receiving a pass with my foot and then going with the ball, or passing the ball straight off. Right? So I've got to receive. Typically then we're looking at catching with hands. We need to know quite a lot about what the ball, what the object, what characteristics does the object have in order to be successful at catching. And I need to be able to intercept the object to be successful, because there aren't very many sport skills where I get to stand still and catch. Right? So in cricket and baseball and softball, we have a person who somewhat gets to stand still and try to catch the ball if the batter misses it, but I can't think of another instance where that's the case. So mostly, I've got to move to intercept, and at the very least, I have to at least put my hands in the right place, even if my body isn't moving around, right? So when we're looking at catching, you've got to be able to distinguish, was it a really good throw, or did they really intercept and catch the ball? Early catching, we have arms and hands out, right? And they really don't do very much. Sometimes they'll trap the ball against their chest. There's not a lot of force absorption. You know, they don't reach for the ball and bring it in. They just wait until the ball hits, and then if they time bending their arms at the right time, they catch the ball. Sometimes you'll see children turn their head away or even close their eyes when the ball is coming at them. And that often happens, we'll come back to that idea when we look at the perceptual information. But that is often the fact that the brain cannot deal with the incoming sensory information where the ball is coming towards their face. Right? It doesn't know what to do with the hands, and so it moves the face out of the way. Right? So you see that quite a lot in inexperienced catchers. They don't move towards the ball. They might reach their hands forwards, but they're trying to get their head out of the way because they don't want to get hit in the face. So what does good catching involve, right? Mechanically, we talked about the idea that if I'm going to try to stop a ball that is flying hard, fast, that I have to be able to absorb that force. Right? So we often say, put your hands out when you reach for the ball and give. Bring your hands in towards your stomach or your chest, right? Because that allows a longer contact time, and so I'm applying force over a longer amount of time, gives me more chance to hang on to the ball and it doesn't bounce back out of my hands. Right? How many times do you watch people, they catch it, they're right there, but they don't absorb, they don't time the absorption or the closing quickly enough and the ball bounces back out again and you got the ball. A good, experienced catcher is able to move around and get to the right place. So they probably will start, if you're looking at a developmental sequence, going side to side is a little bit easier than going forwards and backwards. So I'm likely to see side to side first. And once I'm really good and I understand ball flights and things, we start to see some different hand actions where they understand that if the ball's coming from up here, I need my hands here. But if the ball is coming here, I need my hands down. Right? So those of you that play baseball, softball, would do that automatically. But at what point did you understand, bless you, did you understand that you couldn't catch a ball down here with your fingers pointing upwards? So again, that learning curve for the brain isn't always something you do consciously, but we have to use, these are really good cues to use with people who have some experience at catching. Where are your fingers pointing? So chapter 9 has an observation plan for catching with our yes/no questions. This plan, however, isn't validated. So this is someone's a very good researcher with lots of experience. This is their best guess because the research wasn't done, right? This is their best guess at a component approach to assessing catching. So they're looking at 3 components. Bless you. Arm action, hand action, body action. Right? So they feel that those are the 3 most important components to allow for successful catching. Right? The body action kind of involves foot action, all as one piece. So you've got to be flexible when you're looking at catching because my hand action, for example, do my palms face inwards, might be different depending upon the shape and size of the ball that I'm trying to catch. Okay. So you might have to be a little bit flexible with how you assess on catching. But it's a really interesting skill to watch inexperienced people do. Right? Where is the ball going to be? That's actually quite hard, not for you guys, but for those of us that didn't play ball games when we were younger. That's one of the hardest things. Right? If I'm in exactly the right place at the right time, the actual catching bit isn't, I'm not great at that either, but it's not too bad. But the problem is, in order to move, I have to see the ball get going before I know where the ball is going to be to go over there. And so often I'm too late by the time I get there. And you'll see that with the young kids, you see that with teenagers or adults who are not experienced at ball skills. There's the table 9.1 has your developmental characteristics listed out with descriptions rather than the observation plan, but they're both saying the same thing, it's just a different way. Do I like a checklist or do I like asking the yes/no question where it it's very straightforward. Okay? The checklist gives you more information, but you might want a video for that. Okay? So, things like, what shape does my hand need to be? When we looked at prehension, we said that one of the developmental things we see alter is that as adults, you change the shape of your hand during the reach to pick up whatever the object is. A young child doesn't do that. They reach out, they touch the object, they make some decisions about the object characteristics, and then they shape their hand to pick that object up. Right? Well, if I'm catching a ball, I would have to know, where do I put my hands? What shape do I make my hands? How hard is the ball coming? Can I judge ahead of time how much absorption I'm going to have to do, right? How much force am I going to have to do? I keep my arms relatively straight. If it's a cricket ball, that's going to hurt and sting and jar your elbows. Right? So that might not be a good plan. But I have to be able to judge that. You guys do it automatically. It's very difficult as adults who are skilled to think about what's involved in how you're able to catch a ball. So when you're running your assessment of catching, constraints play a really big role with catching, even more so than with throwing. Okay. So if I'm going to compare person A and person B, or if I'm going to compare person A at point 1 and point 2, I have to make sure that the constraints are preferably exactly the same for those two assessments, or at least as consistent and as close as I can get them to each other. And then I've got to decide what is it I want to know about catching. So, is it important? Do I want a product measure? Do I want the outcome? Right? So, how many catches did they make? So if I throw the ball 10 times and they only caught it twice, does that make them bad at catching? Okay. Or do I want to know what they're doing while they're trying to catch so that I can correct it? Right? In which case I want a process assessment. So I could use my MSU chart, I could use the TGMD, we can use the observation plans. There are other assessments out there that you can use for fundamental motor skills. Right? So, which one? It's not that one is right or wrong. Okay? In my situation, I don't care about the product. It's irrelevant to me because what I'm interested in is helping people catch efficiently, right? Move early, put your hands in the right place, and hopefully a good process translates into a good product, a good outcome. But if I'm a fielding coach, maybe I don't care what they look like as long as the ball doesn't hit the floor, right? It doesn't matter, I don't care about the process. The ball can't hit the floor because then we lose the game. Right? So it's not right or wrong, it's just, what is it I want to know? Okay? There's lots and lots and lots of constraints, task and environmental. Right? What's the trajectory of the ball? What's the size of the ball? Which type of ball? What distance did I ask them to move from where they started in order to intercept the ball? So just over the next week or so, think about what are different objects that are available for catching in sport or in lifestyle activities, right? What about a frisbee? What shape do I have to make my hand to catch a frisbee? It's totally different to the shape I have to make my hand to catch a football. Right? Does the football fly faster or slower? Is it softer to catch or harder to catch? Right? I never got into frisbee because I never like it. It like hurts if you don't catch it right and the edge of the frisbee hits your hand. So I never. Right? So what makes some catching tasks more difficult than others? Okay, what about, let's have a look here, see if I can play you a little bit of film here. Cricket balls are hard, they're not very large. They fly very quick. That was a pretty good catch, actually. Oh. Oh no! No! Right, so he did not close his hands soon enough, and he didn't give us the ball hit. Right, see? He timed his fingers were too late. And these people are good. Right? This is an international, and it's still difficult. Oh, okay. So what? Just be thinking about when you're watching people catch, when you're training this week or walking around. Have a look at what's going on. How soon did they move towards the ball, for example? Because anticipation is crucial to interception skills, right? So if I'm going to manipulate the ball, catch the ball, I have to be in the right place at the right time. So anticipation of where the ball is going to be, that's really, really hard, because there's a lot of factors involved in anticipating correctly. I've got to initiate the movement early, which means I have to have a good idea what is going to happen with the object. If I want to be in the right place at the right time, I've got to assume some things may be ahead of time. So anticipation is quite a nice tool for athletes, because you can fake people out. Right? You can pretend you're going to do one thing and they anticipate, and then you do something else, and they can't turn around and get back in time if you do it well. Yeah. So a lot of people use faking as a strategy in sport, tennis, probably throwing the football. They certainly do in rugby, right? They'll pretend and then they'll go the other way. But once you've moved, you can't change directions that quickly, and so typically you don't make the interception. They often use what we call coincidence timing tasks. Again, a lot of the literature, a lot of the research on anticipation is done in a lab using coincidence anticipation, coincidence timing. But you can see this stuff for real every day in your sport. Right? So a coincidence anticipation task is a motor skill where I have to anticipate the completion of the movement to coincide with an object. might not be my body, right? Hitting a hockey ball in a game, I don't only have to anticipate where I'm going to be, I have to anticipate where the end of the hockey stick is going to be in relation to what the ball is doing. Right? So it's a hugely complicated, it's much, much more complicated than throwing. Mechanically less complicated than throwing. But from a learning point of view, for the brain, these kinds of skills are much more tricky than throwing. Because in throwing, I've got the ball, I'm in charge, I throw it when I want to throw it. But to anticipate takes a lot of practice and a skill. One of the things the research indicates, which is quite interesting, is that manipulation might be better developed before the ability to anticipate. Okay? So that goes back to how do we teach catching? Right? It's much more important to work on can they catch the ball with their hands consistently than it is to start throwing the ball and telling them to move and catch the ball. Because their ability to anticipate where the ball is going to be takes much longer to develop. Right? If you try to do those two things at the same time, then chances are they're not going to be successful and they're not going to enjoy the experience very much. So we often see improvement with age with these kinds of tasks, depending upon the constraints that we put in place. There's many, many influential factors that are involved in coincidence anticipation. Right? So one of the things we know is that young children are less successful the more complex the response has to be. But it isn't just young children. Right? In my view, it's beginners. The research has looked at young children versus older children, but if you took an adult who never did ball games, they would have similar problems. Maybe not as dramatic, but they would be similar. The distance to the interception is an important factor. The further they have to go, the less successful they are at catching. Typically, larger balls are more successfully intercepted than smaller balls. The tricky bit there is that you tend to see a less mature pattern. Right? So they're better at being in the right place for a larger ball, but we tend to see more arm action, chest action, than we do hand action. Right? Larger balls don't encourage as much for them to put their hands out and catch the ball. They're much more likely to scoop. So again, what's important? What is it that I'm trying to work on? Do I want them to catch with their hands, in which case we want to keep the balls smaller? Or do I want them to be successful at getting to the right place? Trajectory is really important. When you're young, you cannot track an arc. Right? That takes time. It's about 7 or 8 years old before they can track a forward-backwards arc. And we know from chapter 3 that projectiles follow an arc, right? So you've got to be a little bit careful. If you're going to throw the ball, you've got to kind of do a bit of a weird throw because you want to keep the ball as flat as possible, because if you toss it up, unless you do a good throw and it lands plop in their arms, chances are they're not going to catch it. Right? Colour of the object and colour of the background have been shown to be important. So So if we're outside, we don't get very much say in that. But we know that a blue object against a white background for younger children seems to be distinctive enough that they are able to perceive the edge of the object and make a successful catch. The older we get, the less important the color of the object. But also, preferentially, right? I notice on the playground that if they've got a color they like, because they're paying more attention, they're more successful at catching. So it's an indirect impact, but if there is not a ball of the color they want, it's much harder to get them to practice catching and be successful. So background color can play a big role in your gym. You can do something about that, right? What if you don't have white walls in your gym and the research says you should practice catching with a white wall? What could you do?
Get a ball of color on the wall.
Sorry?
Get a ball of color on the wall.
No, the ball is the same color as the wall doesn't work because then you can't perceive the edge of the ball. Put up white sheets. Excellent idea, right? Your headmasters, you might be allowed to paint, or you might not. They might say, no, that white's not our school colors, the gym is staying that color. Right? So you put up white sheets, or maybe you could put up big sheets of white art paper, right, and sellotape it to the wall. Something that allows you to use the research to your benefit. We want to use best practice. Best practice involves using the research to drive the choices that we make when we're teaching. Speed of the object. Right? A slower object is much easier to work with than a fast object. Maybe I don't have any slow-mo balls. Perhaps you could use balloons instead. If I'm going, I can hit a balloon with a paddle and then they can try and catch the balloon. That will help them move around to be in the right place. That's good, you're making me hungry. Question. All right, so we're going to stop there for today, and on Wednesday we've got a few more slides to look at the idea of the perception action perspective that we discussed earlier in the semester and how it relates to what we see in manipulation interception skills. And hopefully we'll have time to do a little bit of practice on creating an observation plan. All right? So make sure that you've got a good idea of how the observation plans work, because if we get time, you'll get together in your groups and we'll create an observation plan for a different skill than what we have in the textbook. Okay? All right. Somewhere here, for those of you that are in lab, are playground binders with rubrics in there to show you what needs working on. If you've got questions, of course, come see me in my office hours. If those don't work, make an appointment, come and talk to me. Right? The whole point of handing it in at midterm is so that you get feedback so that the big one at the end of the semester can be better. Okay? All right. See ya.